Every day, your mind is forced to process hundreds of hidden messages and half-truths. In words, promises, even in personal memories. In the depths of the subconscious, an ancient, almost animal instinct has taken root to accurately recognize the distortion of the truth by invisible signals. What if there are time-tested methods to turn this vague instinct into an accurate, almost scientific system for cracking the deepest lies? The person in front of you just lied. You feel it in your gut, but you can't prove it. Is it familiar? The next 15 minutes will change that forever. We are starting to analyze methods that, according to one version, have been kept in secret protocols for decades. We consider these techniques exclusively as extreme but extremely effective examples of applied cognitive psychology, designed to work in conditions where the cost of error was as high as possible. 1983. Basement on the Lubyanka. The focus is on an experienced illegal intelligence officer who has worked in West Germany for 10 years and is undergoing a routine inspection. 12 hours of interrogation. The best experts can't find a single inconsistency in his legend. The story seems perfect, the documents are impeccable, and all the dates match with incredible accuracy. And then, a nondescript man in thick glasses, Major Krylov, enters the room. There are legends about him in narrow circles. They say he can see into a person's soul through closed eyes. Krylov sits down opposite the agent, remains silent for exactly 1 minute, increasing the nervous expectation, and then asks the first question, but not the one that was expected. He asked the agent to tell him about yesterday in reverse order, from the moment he went to bed to the moment he woke up. The agent grins at first, a child's game. He starts to talk and suddenly stumbles, gets confused in the details. What seemed like a reinforced concrete legend is crumbling like a house of cards. After 5 minutes, the seasoned scout tells everything. How is this possible? Our brain is not a silicon processor. It is a biological machine that has evolved for millions of years for one purpose: survival. And this machine has blind spots, vulnerabilities that cannot be closed by willpower. When a person remembers a real event, the brain simply retrieves an already formed file from memory. It's fast, easy, and automatic. But when a person lies, a completely different process takes place. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, begins to construct a completely new reality. She must take into account all the details, connect them logically, check for contradictions. In the direct order, the brain can handle it because it's prepared. But in reverse, it's like asking you to sing a song backwards. This method, known in modern psychology as the reverse chronology technique, has been scientifically proven as a way to significantly increase cognitive load, which leads to a much larger number of diagnostic signs of deception for the observer. Try to remember right now what you did last night. And now tell it in reverse order. Do you feel the tension? But it's true. Now imagine what it feels like to be a liar. This is the first question, the question of reverse chronology, but it only works if the person is not ready. Experienced liars have learned how to circumvent this trap. They memorize the legend in both directions. Therefore, there is a second question, and it is much scarier. Imagine the situation. Your teenager comes home at 3 in the morning, says he was at a friend's playing a video game, didn't notice the time. A classic lie. Could you ask where you were, what you were doing, what time you left your friend? But all these questions are useless. He has the answers ready. Instead, you ask, if a stranger had been watching you all evening, what would he have told me? Look what's going on. The teenager's brain switches from protection mode to visualization mode. He must imagine himself from the outside, see the picture through the eyes of another. And that's where the fun begins. When we lie in the first person, we have one neural circuit working. We control the story. We are the directors of our own film. But when we are asked to look at ourselves through the eyes of another, the mirror neural system is activated, the one responsible for empathy. Research shows that the activation of the mirror system, which is responsible for social cognition and perspective shifting, combined with the need to maintain a complex lie structure, leads to a significant increase in cognitive load, which makes deception more obvious for the observer. Try to remember right now what you did last night, and now tell it in reverse order. Do you feel the tension? But it's true. Now imagine what it feels like to be a liar. This is the first question, the question of reverse chronology, but it only works if the person is not ready. Experienced liars have learned how to circumvent this trap. They memorize the legend in both directions. Therefore, there is a second question, and it is much scarier. Imagine the situation. Your teenager comes home at 3 in the morning, says he was at a friend's playing a video game, didn't notice the time. A classic lie. Could you ask where you were, what you were doing, what time you left your friend? But all these questions are useless. He has the answers ready. Instead, you ask, if a stranger had been watching you all evening, what would he have told me? Look what's going on. The teenager's brain switches from protection mode to visualization mode. He must imagine himself from the outside, see the picture through the eyes of another. And that's where the fun begins. When we lie in the first person, we have one neural circuit working. We control the story. We are the directors of our own film. But when we are asked to look at ourselves through the eyes of another, the mirror neural system is activated, the one responsible for empathy. Research shows that the activation of the mirror system, which is responsible for social cognition and perspective shifting, combined with the need to maintain a complex lie structure, leads to a significant increase in cognitive load and makes deception more obvious for the observer. In the KGB, they called it the third observer method, but they went further. They asked, what would your mother think if she saw you at that moment? How would a father feel? What would it look like from the perspective of a surveillance camera? Each new observer is a new angle of attack on a lie, and sooner or later, the defense cracks. But there are people who go through this ordeal. Sociopaths, pathological liars, those whose mirror neurons work differently. They can look at themselves from the outside and keep lying. There is a third question for them. The question which in the secret protocols of the KGB was called the paradox of impossible choice. Stop for a second. Listen to yourself. Are you sure you want to know? Because after this knowledge, will you start to see lies everywhere? In the words of loved ones, in the promises of politicians, in your own stories that you tell yourself. Do you still want to continue? Good. The third question is, tell me about what didn't happen. It doesn't make sense. Let's explain now. When a person lies, they create an alternate reality. There are two versions of events in his head, the real one and the fiction one, and the brain spends tremendous energy trying to keep them separate from one another. But what if we ask him to create a third version? Should I tell you about what could have happened but didn't happen? Here is the actual interrogation protocol from the declassified archives. The woman is suspected of passing secret documents. She denies it. She says she was at home sick on the day of the alleged transfer. The investigator asks, okay, you were at home. What would have happened if you hadn't gotten sick? Where would you go? What would you do? The woman begins to fantasize. She says she would go to work, then to the store, then home. An ordinary day. And then the investigator asks the key question. Why not to Sokolniki Park? It's so beautiful there in autumn. The woman freezes for a split second, then responds too quickly. I don't like that park. But it's too late. The micropause gave her away.
By creating a third, non-existent version, her brain automatically began to avoid the real place of events because it was already occupied in her mind by a real, emotionally charged story. This is a phenomenon of cognitive avoidance, in which a person subconsciously excludes key, true details in order to avoid internal dissonance. The emptiness in a fictional story accurately indicates the place of truth. In modern psychology, this is called the negative space effect. Artists know how to draw an object. Sometimes it's easier to draw the space around it. So it is with the truth. Sometimes it's easier to see it by the outline of a lie. But this is where the scariest part begins. These methods don't just work for others, they work for you. How many times have you told yourself, I can't do it, I don't have the talent, I'm not good enough? What if it's a lie? the lie that you have been repeating for so long that it has become your truth. Try to apply the first question to yourself. Remember the moment when you decided that you couldn't do something. Now scroll back through the events. What happened before this decision? Did someone say something? Was there a failure? Or were you just afraid to try? The second question, how would a stranger describe your life? Not you with your excuses and explanations, but an outside observer. What would he see? A man who really can't, or a man who doesn't try? The third question is the most painful. Tell us the story of your life in which you achieved everything you wanted. Now find the voids, those places that you automatically avoid in your fantasies. These are the points of your true strength, those places where the truth is so vivid that you are afraid to look at it. There was another method in the KGB. They didn't write about him in the protocols. It was transmitted orally from the mentor to the student, the reverse resonance method. Each person has their own rhythm of truth, the speed with which they process real memories. Mark the time between the question and the answer. When a person tells the truth, it's usually a second and a half. Lies always have a different rhythm, either faster, when the answer is prepared, or slower when it is being constructed on the go. But what if you start asking questions out of phase with the natural human rhythm? Don't give them a second and a half. Ask in 1 second or 2. Knock down the internal metronome. The brain is trying to adjust to a new rhythm, but it cannot simultaneously change the rhythm, construct lies, and look natural. Something has to shut down. And the most energy-consuming is always turned off. Lie. Try it in conversation. Detect the natural rhythm of the interlocutor on neutral questions, and then break it down on important ones. You will see how the person either stops talking or starts telling the truth. But be careful. At the FSB Academy, cadets are warned. A person who has had the truth extracted from him against his will never forgive you, even if he does not understand what happened. On a subconscious level, he will feel invasion, violation of boundaries, psychological rape. Are you ready for such consequences? There's something else, something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Is it worth telling? A method that was used only with particularly important agents. In the archives, it is codenamed the mirror protocol. A person is asked to imagine how he would lie about the event, in detail. Then they ask him to tell them how he would tell the truth about his lies, how he would feel if the lies were true. And the truth is a lie. An amazing thing is happening. The psyche enters a state that psychologists call a dissociative loop. She can't hold all the levels of reflections at the same time. It's like standing between two mirrors and trying to count all the reflections. And at the moment of overload, a reset occurs. The psyche gives out a basic 0 level, the pure, undistorted truth. But this method is dangerous not for the one who asks, but for the one who answers. Some people cannot return to their normal state after such an experience. They get stuck between the levels of truth and lies and begin to doubt their own memories. In psychiatry, this is called induced dissociative disorder. A person loses the ability to distinguish real memories from fictional ones. His personality begins to fragment. Therefore, the mirror protocol was banned in the 90s. Too many agents ended up in psychiatric hospitals. But do you know what the scariest thing is? We apply this protocol to ourselves every day, when we go over in our heads what we could have said, when we imagine alternative versions of events, when we fantasize about what we could have been. And gradually, the boundary between the real self and the imaginary one is blurring. We begin to believe in our own stories. We become the characters of our fantasies. Do you want to check how far you've come? Answer a simple question, but answer it honestly, without embellishment. Who are you? You don't do anything. You don't work with anyone. You're nobody's wife, husband, parent. And who are you? If the first thought is a role, a mask, a function, congratulations, you are successfully deceiving yourself. The real me is hidden so deep that you've forgotten where to look. The KGB knew that the deepest truth of a person is not what he hides from others. It is what he hides from himself.
And the last method is the darkest, the emotional hologram method. The discovery was made by accident. A woman was interrogated about the events of 10 years ago. She claimed she didn't remember anything. The lie detector showed that she was telling the truth. And then the young investigator, violating all protocols, turned on the music, the song of those years. The woman shuddered. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to speak. I remembered everything down to the smallest detail. It turned out that memory is not a file cabinet, it is a hologram. Each fragment contains information about the whole. You just need to find the right lighting angle. Smells, tastes, or melodies bring you back to the moment of encoding information. Scientifically, this phenomenon is known as context-dependent memory, when external or internal conditions that existed at the time of memorization are recreated to improve recall. If you recreate the emotional state of the moment of the lie, the person will not be able to keep the deception. Too many resources are spent on suppressing real emotions. KGB investigators compiled emotional maps of the interrogated. They found out what kind of music was playing on the day of the event, what the weather was like, what the person ate for breakfast, and then recreated these conditions during the interrogation. The man thought he was in control of the situation, but his own body betrayed him. A rapid heartbeat at a certain melody, dilated pupils at the smell, a micro-tremor of his hands at the mention of a detail. The body doesn't know how to lie. It remembers the truth on a cellular level. The FSB has a term for the physiological signature of a lie. Everyone has their own idea, but there are universal signs. When a person lies, his body tries to become smaller. The shoulders droop, the chin presses down, the hands hide. It's an ancient instinct. Conversely, when a person tells the truth about something important, his body opens up. Shoulders straighten, head rises, gestures become wider. The truth makes us bigger, the lie makes us smaller. But back to the three main questions. Now that you know the mechanics, let's assemble them into a system. The first question breaks the timeline. The second is perspective. The third is reality. Together they create what is called a cognitive storm in psychology. The brain cannot defend itself on three fronts at the same time. Something will break through. But there is a caveat. These questions need to be asked in the right sequence, at the right intervals, and with the right intonation. It's an art form. You need to feel the rhythm of a particular person, his purity, his resonance. Major Krylov, the same investigator from the beginning of the story, wrote in his diary after retirement, "In 30 years of work, I have uncovered hundreds of liars, but I have not understood the most important thing. Why do people tell the truth? It's more convenient to lie that way." He died in 1994, did not live to see the era of the internet, social networks, fake news, to a world where it became almost impossible to distinguish truth from lies, or conversely, too easy. The three questions he used remained. They're yours now. The legacy of the KGB is a gift from the past to the future, where truth becomes a luxury and lies become currency. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss the next dive into the mysteries of human consciousness.